Okay. Hi, everyone. Joined today by Mr. Taekwondo himself, Mr. Stuart Anslow. And that title came into my head this morning when I was just thinking about how much stuff you're actually involved in with Taekwondo. So welcome to the Martial Focus podcast. And thanks so much for agreeing to come on.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
No, pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I want to jump right in with you today. I've actually got a copy of From Creation to Unification here. I know this has been out for a number of years now, but I want to start here with you today, if that's okay, because it's very quickly became the go-to book, I feel, and anybody that I talk to who shares our passion for Taekwondo, it's the go-to book. So let's talk a wee bit about it, and if you can tell us how the idea for the book came about in the first place.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you've got any of my other books, weirdly enough, it starts like a lot of my projects. One thing starts and then it leapfrogs to something else. And so, in my first book, the one on the application of patterns, Chang Hong Taekwondo Haseol, I started doing. Even though the book was focused on applications, I'd done little intro sections to each of the patterns. So I'd done some research, and there was 2-3 pages long, and then I'd done some other books. And then when I done Haseol Volume 2, I'd done the same thing. I wanted to keep it the same format. So I started doing these intros. And because I knew how to research much better and had more resources, one of the intros, the Chung Mu one, it was 20 pages long.
Yeah.
And it was like, hold on, I can't do this. This is meant to be an intro. So what I did, I thought, I'll go back. I can't put that all in there because, the whole chapter is meant to be 20 pages, not just the intro. And it would just make the book too long. And some of the other ones were quite long as well. So what I did, I slimmed them down, and I thought, well, I'll just do a book that, for people who aren't into applications, but everybody has to know the pattern definitions.
Yeah.
And so I went back, re-researched or done more research on the ones I had in Volume 1, which went up to Toigi. And then obviously the second applications book went up to the second degree patterns. And, I just put as much info as I could find, as I could gather. And I just made that book like that. And then so all the Chung Mu stuff is now in that book, and it's a slimmed down version in the other book because, people are buying it for different reasons. I mean, and that's how that come about.
I had Grandmaster Doug Cook, who's a good friend of yours, on a couple of episodes ago. And that actually inspired a couple of my own students, a couple of people who listened to the podcast. And I don't know how much of this filters through to you, but they came on and said, right, we're inspired to get a book now. Hey, we want to start getting more into the studying of the art that we're doing. And this is the book that I directed people to. And as I say, all the organisations or anybody who I know, TAGB, AMA for myself, GTF, it just seems to be the go-to for people that want to learn more about the history of our art. Do you know what you've said? You actually, I think it was in the back of the book, which I was scanning through again, or somewhere in the book this morning, and all of the different associations have tiny wee snippets of the meanings in all of our handbooks. It's any of the patterns, but for anybody with any interest in Taekwondo, this really goes in depth for all of the patterns, not just the ITF patterns. You've included GTF patterns in here as well. So what actually went into making this book? How long did you spend on this? What did your research involve? Yeah.
Well, you got to remember, I didn't sit down and think, I'm going to start researching for a patterns book.
Yeah.
Of the definitions. My research actually started from my first book. So I had those notes. Then I had even more notes for the second applications book, like I said. Yeah. Then I went back and researched some stuff. You look for sources and in other books, and you read a lot of the stuff online, but a lot of it, some of it makes sense. But when you see things coming up, on multiple sites, then you think, okay, I'm going to check into that and try and find a verified source. So it's lots of different things. I've been to the library to read books on Korea and stuff like that. And spoke to people in Korea. It just takes you everywhere. But it's just like sit down and try and find as much information as you can about the subject matter by any means possible, really.
Yeah, I think.
And then make sure it's valid as possible, you know, and then put it in the book.
That's one of the things that, and again, perhaps we'll get to talk about this later on, but it's the Creation to Unification book is one of the areas I feel, just from what I've seen online and from people that I've spoke to, that has that's brought people together most. Because a lot of the time it's, well, we do it this way and we think it's this way. Who were your main, did you have people, and I know there's people that have written at the beginning of the book and done sort of forewords and stuff, but was there anybody in particular or a group of people who you really wanted to double check everything with, or who you sought out to get some advice from?
No, not really, because no one's written something as in-depth as that before. So there's not, and if someone had already done it, I wouldn't have done it, you know? Yeah. I know there's an old book by, I think his name's, what's his name? Someone Mitchell, Paul Mitchell.
Okay.
And he done a colour belt book years and years and years and years ago, which I think a lot of people use for their webpage and stuff. So,
yeah,
you know, it only goes up to like Parang or something. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
But apart from that, you know, there isn't anything.
Yeah.
And then when I was doing it, because I done the encyclopedias of Taekwondo patterns books, you know, I know the GTF guys, I know Grandmaster Park had devised some patterns, so I wanted to make it all inclusive as possible, even though the GTF guy didn't like it in Canada, but that's another story. The majority did. So, you know, I added them in, so I thought, well, if I've done it in this book, I'll put them in that book. So that's how they got in there. You know, I just thought it's like a continuation of the other books as much as possible.
Yeah.
But there's no, I mean, there's some facts I check. I mean, anything to do with ITF history,
mm-hmm.
You know, Grandmaster Vitali is the guy, the go-to guy, as everybody knows.
Yeah.
You know, and certain bits, you know, I mean, that book, I think, come out before Alex Gillis's book. So, you know, didn't know he existed then. I've met him since, actually. I met him in 2016.
Right, okay.
We had a nice coffee. I love his book. So his book's a great book. Yeah. But, you know, you just, there's no one place you could go to. You know, when I went to Korea, what I did do, because I have got more facts that I could add in now, because, you know, you go to like the Jungun Museum in Korea and get all the pamphlets and all the stuff. So there's little extra bits, but it's not enough to make it warrant a brand new volume that someone who's got it would go out and buy. So I keep adding things to the list, and eventually one day I might revise it.
Yeah.
But there's no group of people. I'm sure there's people that disagree. Like some people don't like the history of the Farang warriors and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that's up to them. You know.
That's one thing that you're definitely, or I know you for, is being committed to your beliefs, or being committed to the facts of how things have played out, and being firm and saying, no, this is, I know there's many different beliefs and interests, personal interests in a lot of the Taekwondo groups, but you've kind of been able to work with everybody and still been able to be true to yourself as well. And that's something that I think you should be definitely commended on. And I know a lot of people have that feeling towards you. Have you found that difficult, to be so committed to what you believe to be the true facts of things, but then work with all these different people who you clearly work with?
Not really. I mean, as an instructor, I've been independent. I've been on my own since 1999. Okay. Back in the late 90s, virtually everyone was part of an organisation.
Yep.
You know, but I left the one I was with, the BETF, and you know, I decided I don't want any more of that, so I just went solo anyway. So, you know, and my goal as a taekwondoin is to benefit my club and teach my students, make them as good as I can make them, and then do what I can for Taekwondo. Because I've said to someone before, I can't remember, I don't mind sharing things that I know and stuff like that. You know, it's like a lot of masters, they share stuff that they know, but via seminars and whatever, you know. So I just do it in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I do seminars as well, but you know, if it makes Taekwondo better. One of the things that I found when I first started looking at application and stuff is that Taekwondo, no matter where you're from, a lot of associations only teach a very small portion of the art. Yeah. You know, and when it comes to terminology or theory, they're happy with them little snippets from General Choi's manuals.
Yeah.
But when you take them small bits and you realize there's so much more to all areas of, you know, the sparring that you do in an association is 99, 100% maybe competition sparring.
Yeah.
But that isn't even the true definition of sparring in General Choi's manuals.
Yep.
You know, that's just the sports side. And same with the patterns. You know, you perform the pattern, you start at the beginning and you finish at the end, and then you win a medal at competition maybe, or you do it for a grading, and then you don't think about it anymore.
Yeah.
You're in class when the instructor's had enough of you doing your grade pattern and says, "Oh, do low grade pattern." You know, yeah. But there's so much more to. I see martial arts in general as a lifelong encompassing journey, and you know that if everything that I thought should be in Taekwondo as part of it is trained as much as we train patterns and line work and basics, you know, the art will go from saying, if this is Taekwondo, the association Taekwondo, this will be the real Taekwondo. I mean, the camera's probably not big enough. Yeah. You know, I mean, there's still bits that I'm exploring. It's like, I love doing the throws. There's throws in Taekwondo, but nobody back in the 90s, I didn't know anyone that did it. You know, I know more do it now, but it is, if people go, oh, this is the manual of General Choi, the 15 volumes, this is Taekwondo, why aren't they doing the stuff in the mat? Even if you take away, like Grandmaster Kim Bok Man's thought there should be weapons and stuff in it. Yeah. Even if you take that to one side, there's still throws, there's still rudimentary groundwork, joint locks. They're there. So, but we weren't learning them. So,
right, so I've got you here. Somebody that has got so much knowledge, and answer that question if you can. Then, or let's discuss that. Why? I'll give you an example. Back in the day when I did have students sparring when we could be in the same room as each other, pre-COVID, I would have leg kicks, I would have grabs and sparring. Obviously not making contact with elbows as such, but understanding the range of throwing elbow strikes, knee strikes, teaching a lot of leg kicks, as I said. That's just one wee bit that you've touched on there, but why are so many people teaching something this size, and again, for people listening, something small, as opposed to this huge big art that we've got? Why does that happen?
I think part of it is hereditary. You know, once General Choi knuckled down on wanted his patterns performed a certain way, people spent so much time trying to get that right that if the grading times were to be adhered to, there wasn't much time to do anything else. And then, so he passed it down to his chief instructors or pioneers, and they done the same to, say, my instructor's instructor, and then he done the same. Although I don't think the internet and the mind of people has changed somewhat. Back then, I mean, when I started, you just did what you were told to do and whatever, you know, that's what you did. Yeah. I mean, early on, you don't even think you think this is it, you know, and then later on, you know, my instructor was quite a nice guy. He gave me the keys to his dojo and we was able to go in an hour before class. And I remember, I mean, I first realized there was something more to the patterns after reading, I think, a 2-page article by Master Willie Lim in Combat magazine back in the 90s. And around the same time, we had Jeff Thompson's book come out, Real Self-Defense. And it was like, oh, defense, we've got to practice defense. Oh, that's like a knife hand. And then you got, I remember in the article, there was a photo of Master Lim doing an arm lock with a knife hand. So hold on, I mean, now it can be an arm lock and it can be a fence. Yeah. And so we would go down every Tuesday, because classes were on Tuesday and Wednesday, Tuesday and Thursday, Friday originally, but hardly anyone turned up except the hardcore like me. They changed it to Thursday. And we would go down. I mean, there's a really old video of us doing stuff. I didn't know a video camera, but someone brought one down, and it's really like a grainy VHS video of us doing some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And there's some old photos and that. And so once you, I think, what's that saying? The mind's like a parachute. Once it's opened and expanded, it's very hard to put it back how it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone who folds parachutes would disagree, but you know. And so,
yeah,
if there's something to these from the article, there must be something to these other moves. And then you look at, you know, back in the day when I got into martial arts about 6 years before I even did Taekwondo.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was doing other arts, bumming around, you know. So I see things in Taekwondo that, hold on, that looks like something I did when I did judo at college.
Yeah.
And things like that. That's how I can, you know, see the throws sometimes from the blocks and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I showed like I never got to black belt in judo or anything, but I spent a reasonable amount of time one-on-one with a judo instructor, which is another story altogether. But I done a training session for this youth club, and one of the teenagers there, he was a black belt in judo, okay. And he come for the Taekwondo session because it was free and everything. And so I showed him a low block, and he said, "Oh no, that's a hip throw." And I said, "I know," because I knew he was a judo guy. I just wanted to see if he'd recognise it.
All right. Okay. Yep.
And then there's I think Rick Clark, Master Rick Clark, he wrote a good article, the threads that bind us. And what it's basically about is saying there's a lot of stuff across all the martial arts that might be performed slightly different or exactly the same. And one art will have it as this, and another art will have it as that. But really it's the same thing. And if this guy is using this block as an arm lock, then if you're doing a similar thing, you can as well.
Yeah.
So I always say I'm a martial artist first and a Taekwondo in second.
Yeah, that makes sense. What you're saying there makes perfect sense, for sure. Yeah.
Taekwondo is my base art because that's the one I invested in. You know, like I said, I have done other ones, but not obviously to the degree I've done Taekwondo. I'm coming on 30 years in Taekwondo next month. So, you know, then I've knuckled down and invested in Taekwondo, but my interest has always been in all martial arts. Mm-hmm. But then one thing I realised is that we used to do, I don't know if you ever heard of IMAS, International Martial Arts Schools.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
We set that up in 2001. Myself, Dave Melton from America, and Tim Pozinick from Canada. Mm-hmm. It started off as a thing for traveling students. So if you went on holiday, so if I went on holiday to America, you could train at one of the IMAS clubs for free. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no money changing hands, nothing. And I run that for many years with those two. And, you know, we used to do all the website updates. We had hundreds of clubs all around the world. Yeah. And through that, we started doing seminars. So we would do these IMAS seminars. One of them was 8 hours long. Okay. And again, all we charged, I remember we used to charge students £5. Right. Yeah. And instructors would come along, and we would have like 9 instructors, and they'd do half an hour each or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we had everything, you know, jiu-jitsu, MMA, Tae Kwon Do, Wing Chun, you know. Yeah. And at first I used to love it because I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And then I realized because I'm focused on Taekwondo, I want to pick up stuff that benefits my students. Uh-huh. You know, because I know I used to go to seminars years ago. So if there was a seminar at my local list center, like a jiu-jitsu seminar, oh yeah, I'm there. I learn all these jiu-jitsu throws or aikido throws and this, that, and the other. Yeah. But because you're not practicing them all the time, you forget them.
Yeah. You
know? So now I look for stuff in other martial arts that directly complements our Taekwondo. Yeah. I mean, I still like other stuff. I still got a few bits in my toolbox from other arts that whatever, you know. But if I can get students practicing, say, like the low block thing as a hip throw, or body drop throw is probably the best one for it, then we can practice that in class, and I can say, well, you're practicing your low block and you're doing throws at the same time, and so you're going to keep doing it, you know, because when they do Holst and Soul later, suddenly you see them pulling off these pattern techniques, which is kind of cool, you know, rather than, that's another thing I've always, they talk about the cycle of Taekwondo. Have you seen that?
No, to explain.
So you've got basics, sparring, conditioning, and one of the things with Taekwondo is, like I said earlier, all the elements are separate. So you have instructors, and this is just going to upset some people, but you see people, we do Taekwondo, and for self-defense, we teach Krav Maga. And it's like, why do you need to teach Krav Maga for self-defense? Taekwondo is an art of self-defense, and it's there. Everything that you're getting from this Krav Maga, which might be great, is in Taekwondo whole and soul.
Yeah.
Also in the patterns. And this is how all the areas connect. And then some of the patterns techniques can be used in sparring if you're not just doing competition sparring.
Yeah.
You know, and that's how I think a martial art should be. So one area of training is complementing another as much as possible, rather than having it as separate.
Yeah, that's one of the areas that you know better than most. You comment on a Facebook thread, and 300 comments later, you're probably no further forward most of the time. And one of the ones that always sticks out to me was that exact point that you've just made about people teaching Taekwondo classes, but having a self-defense class beside it. Now, cards on the table, I've in the past taught female-specific self-defense classes, and that's another conversation to have. But what I certainly wouldn't do would be to teach Taekwondo, I don't think, and bring in Krav Maga, for example, for self-defense, because why are we learning Taekwondo then? And I know there's lots of different reasons, and I've spoke about it on the podcast as well. Just holistic reasons that many people train, but the techniques are there in our Taekwondo art. The grabs and the blocks and the elbows and the leg kicks, etc. It's all already there. One of the arguments you get on that is that it takes too long to learn Taekwondo, so you should have this other.
I'm talking about there's a difference. I used to run, I haven't done one for a few years now. I used to run self-protection courses for my local council. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But if I just this is like I remember one time I done a women's course. They wanted it was a women's club, so it wasn't, men weren't excluded, just weren't there because it was a women's night or something. Yeah. And so I went there, and you have to teach. If I just took stuff from Taekwondo, I could teach them how to strike, how to do a palm strike, how to elbow, but then you need to teach them other bits and bobs as well. You know, that's where the Jeff Thompson stuff for me is. I mean, I know there's a big influence on a lot of people that teach self-defense. Yeah. You know, you teach them about awareness. There's nowhere in the book of General Choi that talks about awareness, how to maintain your distance, about verbal de-escalation and things like that. Yeah. Or, you know, the traffic light system or something similar to it that a lot of people use. Mm-hmm. You know, so designing a course for people who don't do Taekwondo is, to me, is a different thing. Yeah. But people who do Taekwondo and train regularly, you shouldn't need to necessarily bring in, you know, that's like saying, oh, we do pattern sparring, but for destruction, we're going to bring in the Kokushinkai guys because they're great at destruction because they do it at their competitions. Yeah. So but hold on, we do it as well. You know, yeah. So I see them as two separate things. A good Taekwondo student, I think, if the proverbial hits the fan and they need to defend themselves and they're at a reasonable level, they should do okay. I'm not saying they should be Bruce Lee, you know, but the problem is if they're spending all their time getting their patterns correct and they do some competition sparring, you know, like competition sparring, which a lot of clubs do, you know, and even if they can fight, that is not self-defense. Yeah. Self-defense, if you're defending yourself, you should hopefully be able to, once the situation gets physical, finish it in a few seconds. Yeah. Being able to fight some guy and, you know, what they call a square go or whatever, you know, that's not self-defense. That's fighting or sparring is what comes after self-defense when you got it wrong. Yeah. Yeah. And even self-defense comes after self-protection when you got that wrong. Yeah. So, you know, if you need to be able to fight, but if you learn proper holds and soul and self-defense, hopefully you don't have to fight. Yeah. Brilliant. Right. Okay. Let's go back a wee bit. I want to talk about your earlier books, which you've mentioned. I want to definitely talk about the magazine, which we definitely can't leave out. But if you can, and again, some people don't want to go through every single year of their martial arts history. But how does one who found this love for the martial arts and you came through your sort of different downgrades and then moved into being an author and the editor of
it must be the most successful Taekwondo magazine in the world now. It must be. How did that progression happen?
Taekwondo Times might argue with that one.
Well, the Taekwondo Times, I think, is available every 2 months or so now, and I think I think the format that you've got of being online and the magazine dropping into people's inbox, it works. And again, that's just my opinion, and it's no disrespect to any other magazine, but yeah. So how did you get from being just a student to spreading your sort of wings into these different areas?
Okay, so obviously I come up in an organisation, like I said earlier. I set up my club. Originally it was going to be under them, but due to some history with not history with me, but another instructor who caused a few problems, I decided the best thing to do is just go solo, which I did.
Okay.
Then I obviously going solo. People like to downplay you. Oh, he's going to fade away in a couple of months or whatever. You know, they don't. The old organisation thing. No offense to anybody who doesn't think like this. Is if you leave them, you're going to burn into dust within a few months. They're your lifeline or whatever. And to a large degree, they were. So I thought, I need to raise the profile of the club and myself as a martial artist to show I'm sticking around. So the students were doing well at competitions and stuff like that in the early years. I wrote a few articles for Combat Magazine and Taekwondo and Korean Arts Magazine.
Yep,
you know, I set up the IMS network by then, so I was networking with instructors, and I wasn't out in the world solo. Then I started. The first book was actually, like I said to you earlier, most of my projects either come from something else I'm doing, or it's a springboard to something else. And actually, my first book was I wanted to write about some applications that I sort of researched and learned for my students. So I was going to do like a ring binder thing and give it to the students.
Yep.
And so that started. Then it sort of grew and grew, and it became more. I mean, there's lots of areas in that book that aren't about the application. It talks about the traditional spine, what we call traditional spine, where you can do throws and takedowns and sweeps and stuff like that. Just to hopefully, so that grew from that booklet I was writing for the students.
Yeah.
And then every book after that, it's it's like I said, the from creation to unification, that springboarded from the second applications book. Stuff in it is too long.
Yeah.
And the encyclopedias of Taekwondo books. It was. I mean, I've got loads of books. By Grandmaster Cho was one of my first one. Hidi Cho, your chief instructor. I've got obviously General Choi's 15 volumes and a few others. And I was just thinking, well, this is all. These books are okay, but the way they show some of the moves, you got a photo of someone's back.
Yeah.
And it's showing the transition. So I started thinking, well, how could I write a book that suits everybody, as in all different ways, the guys that do loads of hip twists but no sine wave, those that do the oldest version of sine wave, the newer version of sine wave, and try and do it like it's more of a teaching manual. Yeah. Rather than just a reference guide. Oh, what was that move after that side kick? Oh, it's a knife hand strike, And so that sort of went from that idea. And I already had photos because, again, in my first book, I started taking the separate moves as photographs for the intro chapter at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, but then look, I went back and we reshot all those, and we done all the transition movements. And so that also grew from there. And then there's things about the kiaps, because there's a big ruckus about whether kiaps are actually in patterns, where they aren't there, why they're there, And so I done a little bit of a study on that and went through some old books and some DVDs a friend of mine sent me from America, actually. One of the old school martial artists where he kiapped in his patterns, and I done a guide to that. And then, like I said, it just goes on from there. And then the last book, the whole soul book, I just thought, well, there's no real, there's good self-defense manuals about, like I said, Jeff Thompson's is probably one of the best. Then you've got obviously the Tony Flower stuff and all that sort of stuff. So I put in Amazon on the search box, Taekwondo self-defense, all the various spellings, got 2 books. I bought them.
Yeah.
One was okay, but it wasn't Taekwondo. And The other was just rubbish.
Yeah.
And so I've done my research. See because if someone, like I said, if someone done a book like mine already, I wouldn't waste my time doing it. It's not worth it.
Yeah, understand.
So applications like Akira McDonald stuff and things like that. That's fine because you can always learn more, and his history of traditional martial arts is different from mine. So that stuff's great. But like I said, there's loads of pattern books, so there's no point making a patterns movement book if it's going to be the same. You have to improve on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the last one, like I said, the Wholesome Soul book, I realised General Choi's manual's got a Wholesome Soul section. It's got some stuff in it that's pretty good. Other stuff, I wouldn't risk my life on it. Okay. And then I know about the Havoc list, the habitual acts of violence. I don't know if you heard of that, which is a list of the most common street assault that a martial artist put together. Okay. And so what I did, I combined my training, the stuff in the patterns books, the applications books, and the habitual acts of violence list, and I brought them all together. So instead of saying, "Oh, this is how you defend against a reverse turning kick," which is never going to happen in the street. Yep. This is how you defend against a headbutt. And I offer in that book, I'm not sure if you got it, I try to give 4 different choices. Mm-hmm. So they're not all from the patterns, but a lot of them are. But if you don't like patterns applications, you don't have to use them. So same with the patterns application book. If you don't like any moves, don't use it. That's how I see things. Yeah. So that was the aim of that. And I have got lockdowns, but curtailed it a bit, but I have got an idea for a new book possibly to start writing. I should have started writing in the first lockdown, to be honest, but I like to write, take photos, and then come back and match the photos with the writing so it makes sense, rather than write all the whole book first and then have to take the photos for it. Because sometimes I'm doing photos and one of my black belts will say, "Oh, but what if you did this?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I'll add that in too." Yeah. Then I come back and write what we discussed, little take on things. So yeah, I might do a new one. I'm not sure yet. And the magazine, that luckily it was for the very first issue. I don't know if you know this, but one of my black belts went on to become like a bit of a superstar in Hollywood. Dev Patel. Yep, for sure. Dev Patel. Yeah. And he had just faced Slumdog Millionaire, and he was in England at the time. So I rang him and said, "Look, I'm putting out this new magazine. Can I interview you for the first issue?" So we done an interview with him. So we kicked it off with him in there. So that was good. And we had all the other articles. And I thought, I put it together and we done it free for like about 40 issues. Mm-hmm. So, and we managed to keep it going monthly. I mean, some of the early issues were over 100 pages long, every single issue. Yeah. So we've got some good writers, a lot of people who, they like writing blogs and stuff. They would convert blogs because it's digital. We can do anything. And I said to people, you wrote old articles that you can, if you put it in a martial arts magazine years ago, people will read it, and then the magazine, no one else ever gets to read it. But when it's digital, it's there forever. Yep. And so yeah, that's just it. So we started off. It's a good way to advertise in books and stuff like that. So that was my benefit of it. I had some books out. People read the magazine. They learn about my books. Yeah. Sure. And and that's it. And we just went from there. And since 2009, we put out an issue every single month. Yeah. What issue are you on now? I know that we could quickly do the math there, but you'll know off the top of your head. 144. Amazing. Brilliant. My earliest memory of submitting an article to you was I can't remember whether I'd done an interview with Grandmaster Cho first, but I know that I'd done. Funny enough, we were chatting about this the other day. I was chatting about this very thing because we do apart from the magazines every now and then for the authors that are quite prolific and have got lots of articles. We put special editions together, so it's just their stuff for people who say who love Master Cook's writings. Don't want to buy every single back issue of the magazine. Yeah. They can buy a special edition with like all these writings from over a certain period of years. And I've just done some. You're the only the second person to know this. During lockdown, I've been putting some new ones together, and obviously we have these interviews, profiles, and legacy versions, which are all the pioneers and all the interviews we've done and things like that. Yeah. And I sent the list off because I get a friend in America, Mike, to write the intros for me, because I do the editorials in the magazines anyway, and it's, so it's nice to have a fresh voice. So I send a list off of the index, and he emails me back and says, this thing with Grandmaster Healy Cho, you've got Grandmaster Healy Cho part 1, and then you've got an interview with Grandmaster Healy Cho. Is that part 2? And I was like, no. I remembered back. What happened was, you had interviewed Grandmaster Healy Cho, but you accidentally sent me part of a different thing, which was like a profile piece, which was the part 1. Yeah. And you know what? I realised we ran the interview the month after, but we never done the part 2 of that profile piece.
No, and I think the way you edited it got me out of jail, actually, because I had sent you the wrong thing, and we just very quickly made it into a part 1 and part 2, or a follow-on bit, and you sort of worked your magic, and that got me out of jail, because as always, I was at the last minute to get the stuff submitted, and then ended up sending the wrong thing, and we kind of ran with it, which was fine. But yeah. When are you going to interview Master Emeritus for us? Well, I think we did one. It could be arranged anytime, to be honest, especially during lockdown where things are a wee bit quiet. So yeah, maybe that's the next project that I'll. Okay, actually, since you're here and you've asked, I'll get onto that and we'll do that for you. No problem.
Okay. And Master Darcy then.
Yeah, everybody.
And Master Darcy.
I promise. Right. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was black belts and black belt gradings. And I've watched a lot of footage of your black belt gradings. And my God, do they work for their black belt grading? And I think that's the black belt test, the grading, is just one section of being a black belt. But I wanted your opinion, if you could share it with us, on how important a strong black belt test is and what makes a good black belt, in your opinion, because there's so many of them now, like so many. And I mean, you and I were coming up, and I've spoken about this in the podcast before. If someone had a black belt, they were it, and now there's so many. So how important is the grading, the test, and what makes a good black belt?
Right. The test, from a student's perspective, it's very, very important, because it's something you remember forever. Yeah? So if it's too easy, then it's not worth earning. They've got to work hard, because black belt, no matter, I know a lot of instructors say, black belts, it's just the beginning. And, but if you say, like you was just saying, if you said to like someone who doesn't do martial arts, what's the toughest grade in martial art or whatever, they say black belt, not 4th dan, not 5th dan, they just say black belt. Yeah. To the general public, whether rightly or wrongly, a black belt is invincible. Yeah. In their eyes, because of martial art films and everything like that. So like I said earlier, someone has got to be half decent to defend themselves should it happen, in my opinion. Yeah. So I work on the perspective that by the time someone gets from white to black belt, they should be pretty handy. They should, one, be reasonably good at the system, know the patterns and be able to break the boards, but they should be pretty handy and able to defend themselves, whether that's a 17-year-old or a 52-year-old. So the gradings are quite hard, because they got to earn it. Yeah. And obviously we incorporate what we was talking about earlier, a lot of the things that I feel should be part of Taekwondo anyway. Mm-hmm. So going to a grading for me and just doing, I've seen not many people put their videos online. I done it to show that we're doing legitimate gradings and they're tough and stuff like that. And like I said, we were solo. I mean, the first one we filmed on a VHS camcorder, and another student put it on digital, and then I edited it down. That grading had 6 people. It lasted 8 hours, I think. Okay. And we had a panel, But I've seen other gradings where they've done one pattern, one round of competition sparring, and it was an adult versus a child, and broke a board with a couple of techniques and like one thin board. And it's like, well, that's, I've got yellow belts that can do that. Yeah. That's not what a black belt, the black belt I would want to produce is to me. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're quite long, they're quite tough, but through the years of training, they prepared for them. If someone come from say a club that didn't do that sort of training, it would be, they wouldn't pass.
Yeah.
But, these guys and girls that take the gradings at my club, they've been training through the years to prepare themselves for that day. The two hardest gradings in Taekwondo are your ninth cup grading, because it's your first one, and your black belt grading.
Yeah.
After that, what's out of black belt grading after that, So yeah, we expect a lot. Some of the black belts we get visited quite a lot, and a lot of them are great. But some of the black belts that parents bring, I had a parent ring me once, and she said, "Oh, can my 6-year-old, he's been training at another club, can I bring him down to your club?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." So he's been training. What grade is he? She went, "Black belt." I was like, 6-year-old black belt. So I bit my tongue a bit. And this was back in, say, 2003 or something, 2004.
Yep.
And I was like, what the hell can a 6-year-old black belt be? And I was generally, out of curiosity, interested to see what this kid was like.
Yeah.
And she brought him to the club, and he was terrible. We done the fitness portion, the first after the warm up. We used to spend about an hour on fitness and stretching.
Yeah.
He went crying to his mum in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And as an instructor, that's the mum that doesn't know anything better. But the instructor that give that kid that belt should be ashamed of himself.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah. That was going to be my very next point. Whose fault is that? That's not the kid's fault. Do you know what I mean? It's
no. But what it does, that kid probably will never do martial arts again.
Yeah.
So we've lost a student for martial arts because some guy got a paycheck early.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to be quite this is years ago. I really wanted all Taekwondo to be like that, like how I wanted it. My attitude has changed a bit because now I've got books out and I can show people, oh, this is a great way to train. You can do patterns like this and do your normal patterns. I don't feel people necessarily, I have to force my opinions on people anymore. I used to be quite active in Taekwondo forums. There's a lot of arguing about patterns and this, that, and the other. So I used to get involved in that, and say, no, but patterns are more general job on them this way. This is what you taught for this block. And you used to go back and forth, like a bit on the Facebook groups, not so much now. But personally, I would love people to take on board some of the stuff that we do at my club, watching the videos or what I write about in the books, there's the extra bits and stuff like that. But really, I'm quite happy to people do whatever they want to do. Personally, as an instructor, I see it as my duty to my students to make sure they're prepared for the real world. Not just become good black belts within the association who can win a gold medal and stuff like that. As I feel as a martial artist, that is the duty of myself as an instructor. The only thing I would say is that the average person who doesn't know anything about martial arts or Taekwondo that wants their son to do it, they think everything is equal across the board. And they don't research or anything like that. And it would be nice if, a lot more students would, they just wouldn't, a lot more students wouldn't just learn the bare bones that they need to pass a grading. They're developing them for life beyond that. That's what I feel as myself as an instructor. But if people are happy with their club and stuff like that, they don't do any applications and they only do competition sparring, or they just love competition sparring but don't want to do any fighting type sparring, that's fine with me too. I'm happy. I'm like to be the old days of I don't know if you remember it, ITF Online. A lot of old schoolers will remember that notorious unmoderated forum of Taekwondo people around the world. Them days are over for me. I see a thread, I don't like something, I rarely post on it anymore. I'm not interested.
I'm glad you actually came back with that sort of final thought on that subject, because that couldn't have set us up any better for the last thing I want to talk to you about today. Is this idea of one Taekwondo. Now, when I was a lot younger, in fact, not that much younger, but always kind of thought to myself, I wonder if there could be a day where it was, I mean, I compare it to something like judo. Now, if you go into most judo clubs in anywhere in Britain or the world, it's really one sort of encompassing federation that goes all the way through to their Olympic. And again, judo is much more, I would think, much more sport orientated, because that's the path that they're taking. Now, getting to the point, I always thought that maybe we, as Taekwondo groups, one day would have no ITF or WTF or GTF or AMA or whatever. And then as I matured a wee bit, that idea kind of left my head, and I actually started concentrating more on, well, actually, if I brought myself and some of my students to your school, and it was two completely different federations or organisations or styles, and we just got on the floor and we sparred together and we've done some patterns, that to me is a better idea of unifying Taekwondo and sharing this art that we have. So can we have a wee discussion, please, on, I don't think we should get into why people don't get on, but more about having a wee discussion on what we've got in common and the possible benefits that you do a side kick this way and I do it this way, or you block this way and I block that way, underneath this umbrella of Taekwondo in general.
I would say to that I think, for me, I mean, maybe I'm not seeing it because I'm not in an association. We are more together now in Taekwondo, one Taekwondo, than we ever were.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
You know, I remember my early days in the BETF. The BETF was formed because the chief instructor fell out with Grandmaster Ree over something. Same with the TAGB. So they're formed. So everyone's got these opinions of the other people, and so I mean, I remember once our chief instructor, he set up over Tannoy at one of our competitions. Grandmaster Ree is holding a tournament. If you go, you will be expelled from the organisation. And it was like, I mean, at that time, I was going outside competitions and, you know, seminars with other people, and it was like, oh, but to publicly say that. And the problem is, it's like one thing I see with bad students, right, is when you get a student who's a bit of a twat at a competition, you can bet their instructor's the same.
Yep.
These attitudes, they pass down. And if winning at all costs was your instructor's attitude, you know, like sweep the leg, Johnny, no matter what, you know, that's a lot of students will pick that up.
Yeah.
But since sort of obviously, I don't know, you read it in the magazine I wrote, we were doing these history sections called the Decades of Taekwondo. So it's like how Taekwondo was like in the 60s in Missouri, and in the 70s in New York. Yeah. And I took on the 90s. A couple of people done the 90s, but I done one, and I subtitled it The Reign of the Orgs, which was, it was heavily dominated by all the bigger Taekwondo's associations. Yeah. You know, AGB, BTF, UKTA, and they all didn't like each other. I won't say hate each other, and it was almost indoctrinated in you not to mix with them, don't do this, don't do that, you know. But then I went solo, set up IMS, and I realized, well, hold on, this attitude is not the attitude of a lot of people, whether they're in an organization or not. Yeah, they're dictated to because the heads of these groups or the committees or whatever have put these rules in place to try and keep their students and stop them leaving or stop them seeing other stuff that might make them leave. You know, it was sort of like the business side of Taekwondo back then. Yeah, because obviously the more students that lead, if an instructor leads all his students, that's grading income gone, seminar income gone, course income gone, competition income gone. You know, so they wanted to keep the students. And part of the reason the black belt syllabuses in a lot of groups back then wasn't as big or as diverse as I would have liked them, but that's another subject. But since splitting, and especially a few years since the ITF split and more ITFs have grown up, and you know, there's people are much more open, and it's not just individual like independent instructors like me that are grouping together because we need to keep together. Yeah, you know, providing there's no comeback from the group, like I was saying about the Ricky Hart competition, you know, that they're not going to get expelled. People are much more open with other people. You know, it's like I chat to guys in Norway and WTF guys and you know, and they come and train at my club. I have people from Australia come and train at my club. Very old school taekwondo. I mean, we were sparring and he'd done a spinning elbow in my head. I didn't see that coming, you know.
Yeah.
And it was like, I thought we were doing competition type sparring, like free sparring.
Yeah.
So I think now people are more open. I think the one taekwondo thing is now there's less control, and also that obviously as these groups compete against each other, they need, you know, suddenly there was a time where you couldn't go to another group's competition unless you were a member of their organization. And then suddenly it's like, oh, everyone can come.
Yeah.
Because then you realize, well, that's because they're not getting as many people coming and they need more revenue stream.
Yeah.
The only problem with stuff like that is they're open-minded to allow other people to come, you know, whatever, but they're not open enough to take into account their differences.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you went to a competition run by, say, one of the ITFs, I won't name any of them personally, and they let you in,
yeah,
you couldn't get anywhere in patterns if you've done your patterns as you do them in the GTF, you know. Oh, sorry, in AMA, not GTF.
Yeah, I understand.
So now I'm very selective with the competitions. You know, I only go to ones that will allow everyone, in my opinion, to compete on an equal footing. I mean, we done a competition back in 2004, and it was just when they was pushing the sine wave quite heavy, and it was really overemphasizing it.
Yeah.
And so I took about, I think, 8 students there, and they done good patterns. One of them got a bronze somehow, but one of my guys, a green belt, he done a pattern, and it was, in my opinion, much better than the person that was having 2 up at once. He finished it, and they was only halfway through because the sine wave thing was so slow, and none of them won any other medals in patterns because they didn't do it that way. And this is the attitude. And then they all went on and won gold and silvers in sparring and breaking and everything. But I never went back there because we're paying the same money to enter, but we can't compete because we don't do it your way.
Yeah.
And that bugged me. And that's how competitions were for a while. So I get it if it's a world championship, you know, that's fine. ITF world championships, then they want it to see it that way. But I think now, when it comes to training, the most important part of Taekwondo for me has always been training, not medal, not, you know, how many black belts you got or even how good they are. It's just training, and providing you're prepared to train with other people who are, the differences are minimal, not even minimal. It's the diversity of different organizations. They've done us a favor in the end.
Yeah.
Because if people hadn't split, we would never have these different types of, we would not have the errors that we have, like the 1970s style hip twist type, almost karate style, and then the first sine wave. I mean, a lot of people that do the sine wave now don't even know there was a first type or a second type. It was changed. You know, they got no clue. And I'm talking about people that have been around quite a while. But I think it's especially with the applications guys. Like you've got Roy Rolstad in Norway. He's got the Gradings project. He's doing basically what I'm doing, and Kieran's doing, and Colin Wee's doing, you know, but they're all slightly different. But the thing that binds us is, one, we do Taekwondo, and 2, we're interested in expanding it further than it was. You know, and it's that, rather than someone in our ear saying, you can't train with them guys because they're in this group. You know, and a lot of them are in groups. I know some are solo, some are in groups, and it's that passion. I think the passion for Taekwondo that is bringing people together now, and the relaxing of the organizational rules allows it to happen even more. I think back in the 90s, people would have been happy to train with other people.
You
know, they just weren't allowed.
I was on a thread recently with a very famous British grandmaster, and who will remain nameless. I've actually spoken about this. I spoke about this with Stephen Gale on the podcast, and pretty much he was very publicly saying, if you don't do Taekwondo exactly as the encyclopedia has been laid down, then you don't do Taekwondo.
I know exactly who you're talking about, because I've read that loads of times.
So that's the majority of practitioners then in the world. Because if you include WTF practitioners and GTF practitioners and AMA practitioners and independent, and I know you do follow to a degree or mostly. So what does that mean? How does that bring us together when you're talking about one of the most senior grandmasters in all of the UK saying something like that?
Well, the problem is, it's they're of that generation I was just talking about. This is the right one you just mentioned. This is our way. Like, if that group, if he was running a group, and maybe does, their mind are just not open. They're blinkered.
Yeah.
You know? People say, "Oh, you should do." If you're not doing Taekwondo now with a new sine wave, again, you're not doing Taekwondo. Yeah. Taekwondo has been around since 1955. If someone left that group in 1960 and carried on doing it how they done it in the 1960s, they're going to look vastly different to someone who's just got a black belt this year or last year, say, maybe the year before with COVID. But they're still Taekwondo, and they're still doing the general joy Taekwondo. Yeah. It's just that they've stopped at a certain point. It's like someone who loves driving classic cars. Just because he drives a old 1960s Mark II Escort or something, he's still driving, it's still a car.
Yeah.
You know, just, you don't always have to have the latest version of everything.
And I know we could go back and forth with this all day. One point that always sticks in my head was I went to school with a girl who was a second degree black belt in WTF, as it was at the time. And actually, she was a really successful fighter in sort of the British tournament scene for her age anyway. And she didn't know who General Choi was. Yeah. She had no idea. Now,
I'm not surprised. It's only recently South Korea's acknowledged him.
Well, that's that. And again, this might be for podcast number 2, if you'll oblige me and come back on again. But that, and I was a teenager at high school at the time, obviously, and was nowhere near as mature in thought or anything, but just couldn't get my head around this person was a second degree black belt in Taekwondo and had never once by an instructor or an association or had any conversation whatsoever about General Choi, and it was just completely normal.
Have you ever read a WTF book?
Not really, to be honest.
The history section is very, very different. Taekwondo is 2,000 years old. There's a cave painting on a wall, and that's where it started from, and it's never changed because they obviously General Choi fell out with South Korea.
Yeah,
they labeled him traitor and everything like that. So they're not gonna. This is their national sport. It's a political thing.
Yeah,
they're not gonna acknowledge him as. You can. Everyone can. Think for themselves or research themselves and decide for themselves how much, whether he's the sole founder or he sowed the first seeds or how much they want to give him credit for.
Yeah.
But because of the political situation in South Korea, the WTF, who is obviously run by the government to a point, when they put the courts together, you can't go around. Back that time, it might have been a democratic government, but it was still a dictatorship.
Yeah.
It was just a westernized dictatorship, sort of.
Yeah.
People don't realize that. And you can't be teaching a national sport and saying, well, actually, we can't go with the history you've been given. This guy called General Choi, who was a traitor to our country, started it all, And so then it's just carried on down the line. Like I said, it's only recently he's been acknowledged when I went to Korea in 2015, we spoke to WTF guy because we walk around in a dough box all the time, as I know Roy was telling you. You're in them all the time, walk around the streets. It's the only country in the world I walk around the street in a dough box. Imagine doing that in America or somewhere, or even over here.
Yeah.
And people will come up to you and start chatting to you and go, "Oh, Taekwondo."
Yeah.
And old people, and we met some guys in one of the restaurants we was in, and we went and had a chat with them. They were WTF guys, and they were fascinated that we knew the names of their historical figures, Do San, Won Yo, and they're like, how do these guys know that?
Yeah.
And then we was talking about it, but they had never heard of General Choi either.
Yeah.
Because they're just not taught it. And if you're not told something, you don't know it.
Yeah, of course. I just think I obviously find this stuff fascinating, as I know you obviously do, having written so much about it. But I think that there's a lot of people that maybe come to the art and would have tuned out by now, because they're there for all these reasons that are non-political. And
yeah.
I don't want, not just thinking about my own students, just thinking about Taekwondo practitioners throughout the world. And I know that sounds quite grand, but to have access to all of these wonderful things that we can give them access to without having to be bogged down in, this is our history, but you can't believe the next guy, and he's telling lies about the next guy, and a punch is a punch, a kick's a kick, a stretch is a stretch, and there's so many benefits without us getting bogged down in that.
I actually love the differences in Taekwondo.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have never have I ever agreed with what that grandmaster said, ever.
Yeah.
There's no version of Taekwondo, apart from the really crappy versions where they don't really care about the art. All they care about is getting students to black belt really quickly.
Yeah.
You know, I like them. I love watching like the hip twist patterns from other groups. I'm not going to mention groups in particular. Yeah. You know, I like that. In fact, I even made a video. I was so annoyed once about how people go to competitions, like the thing I was talking about with my students at a competition where if they didn't perform patterns this way, yeah. And I was speaking to a referee at one of the other competitions. He goes, "Well, I can't really evaluate it properly because I don't know how to do them patterns like that. I've never seen them." Yeah. I said, "Well, go on YouTube and have a look." You'll go in there to a competition that's open to all types of Taekwondo stylists of the Chang Hong side, and it's not WTF. But you're getting a lot of judges, and I presume a lot of others like him, that can't judge someone unless they do the pattern virtually the way they've learned it. Yeah. But we've got the internet now. So I made this video called the Gaybeck Collage. And all I did was take pattern Gaybeck, found as many videos as I could, and chopped it up to show, and it just Gaybeck from the beginning to end with all different people doing it all different ways. Brilliant. And it just to show people that this is how Taekwondo really looks.
Yeah.
And to only look at it one way is to do that, you're basically ignoring Taekwondo history, because General Choi had his Taekwondo this way, and if everybody carried on and does it the way just before he passed away,
yeah,
we would that would be lost to history.
Yeah.
You know, apart from the old 8mm cine films we see. You know, I like the fact that you can train with someone who can still do it like that.
Yeah.
You know, they bring different stuff. It makes it interesting. If Taekwondo is a lifelong journey, you want it varied. It's going to get really boring real quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. You know? Spot on. Okay, so a couple of things just before we finish up. There's possibility that there's a new book in the offing sometime soon. You can get once you get started. That is.
It won't be soon. Usually when I think about book, I don't mention it. But lockdown, you know, we're doing an interview.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of ideas, to be fair. Whether I'll do some research and see. I know there's probably been books out. Well, there is books out on the same subject, but mine will be, again, if I can bring something different to the table, then I will. But books take at least two years to write, and then you've got to do all the photos and stuff. So, you know, it's not coming out anytime soon, that's for sure.
Yeah. And hopefully trips to Korea again in the future. Is that something you would do?
Yeah, definitely. We were meant to go next year, actually. I think it was. We set up we started doing inroads into it, but then COVID hit, and so we just basically delayed it. Some other stuff has happened as well. Not to do with us, but but yeah, definitely. Once COVID is done, the pandemic is over. Hopefully, we're going to put that together for anyone. Again, like Roy told you in his interview, there's all different types of Taekwondo people on these trips, and we don't bicker, we chat, everyone's got the thing that brings them together is the Taekwondo, and they're interested in the career and the history, and you know, some more than others, you know. But it doesn't matter. It's, you know, it's anyone. I know anyone who's watched Roy's video, I know he said quite a lot about the Toll Tour. I would tell anyone, the one thing that sold the Toll Tour to me was Grandmaster Batali.
Yeah.
And I say this a lot because I can say, yeah, it's great. We went to here, we went to there. I actually taught over there. And yeah. But this is what sold me. I was chatting with Grandmaster Vitali, who went on, I think, one of the very first one, actually. And he said to me, and this is no word of a lie, and he's traveled all over the world for Taekwondo.
Yeah.
Everywhere. He knows everybody. He's been North Korea, South Korea, Czechoslovakia, when it was probably still there, and wherever. Yeah. And he said the greatest, best thing he's ever done in Taekwondo was go on the total.
Wow. There you go.
And when someone like that sells it with one line, you think, all the things you've seen, all the courses you've been, everything, you say this is the best thing, that sold it for me. And luckily, Master Cook was visiting England at the time. So a short while after that, I went and chatted to him. And then a couple of years later, we ended up 2015, we ended up in Korea.
There you go.
And then we went back 2018, so just 3 years later.
Brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. I'll keep going back there. I love it. It's great.
Okay, one last thing. Just tell everybody just your website, how they can. I know your books are definitely on Amazon. People can access your books on Amazon. And if people want to subscribe to Totally Taekwondo, how would they do that?
Just go to www.totallytkd.com.
Perfect.
Hit the subscribe button.
There you go. Brilliant. Okay, listen, thank you so much for doing this. Yeah, as I said, we'll probably have to have another podcast because there's so many subjects that just lead on to the next and lead on to the next. But maybe that's
I'm like most Taekwondo people, and the people I've had. One of the things with IMUS that it's made many great friends, and so we travel now, and you can go and we go and stay at each other's houses. So like Brendan Dugan come over from New Zealand a little while ago, and he needed somewhere in London to put his head up for a night, so we come here.
Yeah.
And like what we're saying in the podcast, everything goes off. We sit up for hours and hours. We could talk all night.
Yeah.
Taekwondo people.
Yeah.
And I have on many occasions.
Indeed.
So,
right. Yeah. Okay, sir. I'll let you go there and get on with your day. Yeah. Listen. Thank you so much for coming on and being one of our guests.
Yeah. No worries. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Take care of yourself. Thank you.
Okay.
Speak soon. Bye. 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 Bye.